The weekends changed first. Ryan was used to sleeping in on Saturdays, scrolling his phone, killing time until friends texted. Now, every Saturday morning started early. Daniel woke him at 7, handed him a plain hoodie, and drove them back to the same medical center they had visited the week before. Ryan didn't complain, not once. The first day, he spent most of his time wiping tables in the waiting area, refilling water cups and pushing a supply cart down long hallways that smelled like antiseptic and exhaustion. The people he passed barely noticed him. Some stared at the floor, some stared at nothing at all. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't loud, and that was what made it so heavy. During a break, Ryan sat on a plastic chair, hands clasped tightly, eyes unfocused. Daniel watched him from across the room, saying nothing. This wasn't about lectures, it was about letting reality do the talking. On the drive home, Daniel finally asked, "How was it?" Ryan answered quietly, "Hard." Daniel nodded, "Good." Ryan didn't argue. He understood what his father meant. By the third weekend, Ryan had started to notice patterns. The coughing, the oxygen tanks, the visitors who came less and less often. One man asked Ryan to help him adjust his blanket. Another thanked him for bringing water, his voice shaky but sincere. Ryan said "you're welcome" every time, but the words felt heavier with each repetition. That Sunday night, Ryan sat at the kitchen table long after dinner, staring at his untouched homework. Daniel noticed. "Something on your mind?" Ryan hesitated, then shook his head. "I'm fine." Daniel didn't push. He remembered what it felt like to be 16 and cornered by concern. But later that night, Ryan knocked softly on Daniel's bedroom door. "Dad?" Daniel looked up from his book. "Yeah." Ryan stepped inside, closing the door behind him. He stood there for a moment, hands shoved deep into his pockets. "I didn't start smoking because I wanted to be cool," Ryan said suddenly. Daniel set the book down slowly. "Okay." Ryan swallowed. "I started because I couldn't sleep." Daniel frowned. "Since when?" "Since Mom," Ryan said quietly. The word hit the room like a dropped plate. Daniel's chest tightened. His wife had been gone for 3 years now, long enough that people expected the pain to be managed, controlled, quiet. Ryan stared at the floor. Everyone else moved on. School did. You did. I didn't know how. Daniel felt guilt rise sharply. "I didn't know you weren't sleeping." "I didn't want to bother you. You already had enough to deal with." That sentence hurt more than anything else Ryan had said so far. Ryan continued, voice steady but fragile. "Ethan offered me a cigarette one night. He said it helped him relax. I thought maybe it would slow my head down." Daniel leaned forward. "Did it?" Ryan shrugged. "At first. Then it just made me feel worse when it wore off." Silence filled the room. Daniel rubbed his face with both hands. He had been so focused on keeping the house running, on being the strict, reliable parent, that he had missed the quiet signs of grief still living inside his son. "I thought if I stayed strong, you wouldn't have to worry," Ryan said. Daniel stood and crossed the room, placing a hand on Ryan's shoulder. "You don't have to protect me." Ryan's voice cracked. "I know that now." The following weekend, something shifted. While volunteering, Ryan recognized one of the patients, a man not much older than his father, struggling to walk. Without being asked, Ryan moved to his side, steadying him. "Thanks, kid," the man said, breathless. Ryan smiled faintly. "No problem." Daniel watched from a distance, realizing this punishment had done something he hadn't fully planned for. It hadn't just scared Ryan away from smoking. It had given him perspective. On the way home, Ryan spoke first. "Dad?" "Yeah?" "I don't want to do this because I'm being punished anymore. I want to keep helping." Daniel nodded. Then it stops being a punishment. That night, they talked longer than they had in years. about Ryan's insomnia, about Daniel's fear of failing as a single parent, about how silence had crept in where conversation used to be. "I didn't stop smoking just because of Grandpa," Ryan admitted. "I stopped because I don't want to disappear like that." Daniel placed a hand on his son's arm. "You won't." At school, things began to change too. Ryan stopped hanging around the group that smoked behind the gym. When Ethan asked why, Ryan didn't lecture him. "I've seen where it goes," he said simply. Some kids laughed, others didn't. One afternoon, a teacher pulled Daniel aside during pickup. She said, "Ryan's been different, more focused, more present." Daniel smiled. "He's finding his footing." That evening, Daniel found a note taped to the fridge in Ryan's handwriting. "I didn't smoke today. I slept 4 hours straight last night." Daniel closed his eyes, emotion washing over him. But not everything was fixed. Late one night, Daniel heard Ryan pacing upstairs again. The familiar sound sent a spike of fear through him. He climbed the stairs quietly and knocked. "Ryan?" The door opened. Ryan's eyes were tired but clearer than before. "I had a bad dream," Ryan admitted, "but I didn't want to smoke." Daniel nodded. "Come sit." They sat on the edge of the bed, talking until Ryan's breathing slowed. As Daniel turned to leave, Ryan spoke again. "Dad?" "Yeah?" "Thank you for not yelling." Daniel paused at the door. "I almost did." "I know," Ryan said, "but you didn't." That choice mattered more than either of them fully understood yet, because the truth was the cigarettes were never the real problem. They had been a symptom. And in finally seeing that, Daniel had opened a door neither of them had known how to unlock before. By the 4th week, the routine no longer felt like punishment. Ryan still woke up early on Saturdays, still pulled on the same plain hoodie, still rode with Daniel to the medical center, but the tightness in his chest had eased. The building didn't scare him the way it had at first. It grounded him. It reminded him that choices didn't just vanish when you ignored them. They stacked up quietly and waited. Daniel noticed the change too. Ryan moved with more purpose now. He greeted the front desk staff by name. He knew which patients needed extra time, which ones preferred silence. He learned to listen without rushing, something Daniel himself was still practicing. One afternoon, as they were leaving, a nurse stopped Daniel near the exit. "Your son's been good for the floor," she said. "He treats people like they matter." Daniel glanced over at Ryan, who was holding a door open for an older man with a walker. "He always has," Daniel replied. The realization settled in gently, without blame. Ryan hadn't suddenly become responsible. He always had been. Daniel had just been late to notice. That evening, after dinner, Ryan lingered at the table. He traced a line on the wood with his finger, thinking. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Of course," Daniel replied. "Why didn't you yell when you found the cigarettes?" Ryan asked. "I expected it." Daniel leaned back, considering. "Because yelling would have been about me, not you." Ryan nodded slowly. "It would have shut me down." Daniel smiled faintly. "You know me well." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Ryan spoke again. "I used to think rules were there to control me." "And now?" asked Daniel. "And now I think they're supposed to protect me," Ryan said, "but only if you explain them." Daniel felt something loosen in his chest. "I should have explained more." The next week brought a small test. Ryan came home later than expected on a Tuesday. Daniel checked the clock, felt the familiar rise of irritation, and stopped. He waited. When Ryan walked in, backpack slung low, Daniel asked one question. "What happened?" Ryan answered honestly. "Study group ran long. I should have texted." "Thank you for telling me. Text next time." Ryan nodded. No grounding, no raised voices, just a correction and a path forward. That night, Daniel realized how easily old habits could return, and how important it was to interrupt them. At school, a counselor suggested grief support for Ryan. Daniel brought it up gently. "You don't have to, but it's an option." Ryan thought about it for a long time before agreeing. The sessions were awkward at first. Ryan didn't like talking about feelings with strangers, but he listened. He learned words for things he'd been carrying alone: restlessness, guilt, anger that didn't have a clear target. One evening after a session, Ryan said, "I didn't realize how much I blamed myself." "For what?" Daniel asked. "For Mom," Ryan said quietly. "For not being there enough, for moving on too fast, for everything." Daniel pulled the car over and turned to him. "That wasn't your burden." "I know," Ryan said. "I'm starting to." At home, Daniel found himself changing too. He asked more questions. He shared more about his own fears. He admitted when he didn't have answers. The house felt less like a place of rules and more like a place of repair. The turning point came unexpectedly. One Saturday morning, Daniel woke with a tightness in his chest that wouldn't go away. Ryan noticed immediately. "You okay?" Daniel said, "I'm fine," automatically, then stopped. He saw Ryan's face, concern, not panic. He corrected himself. "I don't know, let's get it checked." At the urgent care, Ryan sat beside him, alert and steady. The tests came back clear. Stress, nothing more. But the experience shifted something between them. Ryan saw his father not as an unbreakable wall, but as a person who could ask for help. On the drive home, Ryan said, "If I hadn't started smoking, would we have talked like this?" Daniel considered the question. "Maybe not," he said honestly, "but I wish we didn't need a scare to start listening." Ryan nodded. "Me too." That night, Ryan taped another note to the fridge. "I slept 6 hours, no cigarettes, talked it out instead." Daniel kept that note. As the weeks passed, Daniel made a decision. He sat Ryan down one evening after dinner. "I'm ending the volunteering requirement," he said. Ryan blinked. "Why?" "Because it's not a punishment anymore. It's something you chose." Ryan smiled. "Can I keep going sometimes?" "Yes," Daniel said, "on your terms." Ryan exhaled, relieved. "Thank you." Daniel hesitated, then added, "There's something else. I'm sorry I didn't see how much you were hurting. I thought being strict would keep you safe. I didn't realize listening would do more." Ryan's eyes shone. "You're doing both now." They shared a quiet laugh. One afternoon, Ryan ran into Ethan, the friend who had first offered him a cigarette. Ethan looked tired, distracted. "You quit, right?" Ethan asked. "Yeah, a while ago." Ethan scoffed. "Must be nice having a dad who freaks out." Ryan shook his head. "He didn't freak out. He showed me the truth." Ethan didn't reply. He looked away, conflicted. That night, Ryan told Daniel about the conversation. "Did I handle it wrong?" Daniel asked. Ryan thought. "No, you didn't punish me to scare me. You punished me to teach me." Daniel nodded, and then we learned together. As winter gave way to spring, the house felt lighter. Not because the rules were gone, they weren't, but because the reasons behind them were clear. Ryan still struggled some nights, Daniel still worried, but now worry led to conversation, not control. On a quiet Sunday evening, they sat on the porch watching the sky fade. "I know I messed up, but I'm glad you didn't give up on me." The cigarettes were gone, but their shadow lingered longer than either of them expected. Spring arrived quietly. Trees outside the house filled in with green again. Daylight stretched later into the evenings, and the world seemed to move forward without waiting for anyone to catch up. Inside the house, something had shifted too, subtle but permanent. Ryan still woke up some nights, heart racing, mind too loud to rest. But now, instead of reaching for something to numb the noise, he sat on the edge of his bed and breathed the way the counselor had taught him. Sometimes he walked downstairs and found Daniel in the living room, reading or pretending to read, waiting without asking. They didn't always talk, and that was okay. Daniel noticed the change in himself most during moments that used to trigger him. When Ryan was late, when his grades dipped slightly, when he seemed distant, the instinct to clamp down, to control first and ask later, still surfaced. But now, Daniel paused long enough to choose a different response. One evening, Ryan came home with red eyes. Daniel saw it immediately. "Rough day?" he asked. Ryan nodded. "Yeah." "Want to talk now or later?" Daniel asked. Ryan considered it. "Later." Daniel nodded. "I'll be here." That simple exchange would have been impossible months earlier. At school, Ryan joined a peer group focused on stress management. He didn't advertise it. He didn't hide it either. When someone asked, he shrugged and said, "It helps." His teachers noticed his confidence growing. Not louder, not bolder, just steadier. He raised his hand more often. He asked for extensions when he needed them. He stopped pretending everything was fine. One afternoon, the counselor emailed Daniel. "Ryan's doing well. Not perfect, but healthier. Thank you for showing up when it mattered." Daniel read that line 3 times. Showing up. Not punishing harder, not being stricter, just showing up. The biggest surprise came one Saturday morning when Ryan knocked on Daniel's door. "Dad?" he asked. "Can we go to the center today?" Daniel blinked. "I thought you wanted a break." "I do," Ryan said, "but there's someone there I want to check on." They drove together, not as punishment, not as obligation, but as choice. Inside the medical center, Ryan moved with quiet confidence. He spoke gently to the staff. He sat with a man who didn't have visitors. He listened more than he talked. Daniel watched from a distance, heart heavy and full, all at once. On the drive home, Ryan stared out the window. "I don't ever want to disappear," he said suddenly. Daniel glanced at him. "You won't." Ryan shook his head. "I mean, I don't want to disappear inside myself. That's what smoking felt like." Daniel tightened his grip on the wheel. "I wish I'd known sooner." Ryan looked at him. "You know now." That night, Daniel found the old cigarette pack still in the trash bin in the garage. He hadn't taken it out yet. He stared at it for a moment, then sealed the bag and carried it to the curb. When he came back inside, Ryan was in the kitchen. "You okay?" Ryan asked. Daniel nodded. "Just taking something out." Ryan smiled softly. "Good." Weeks later, Daniel's father passed away quietly in his sleep. The call came early in the morning. Daniel sat on the edge of the bed, phone pressed to his ear, listening. When he hung up, he didn't speak right away. Ryan noticed. They sat together, the house still and heavy. "I'm sorry," Ryan said. "Me too." At the service, Ryan stood beside his father, steady. He held Daniel's hand when the weight became too much. He listened to stories about the man he had met only once, stories about choices, regret, and time that doesn't wait. Afterward, Daniel found Ryan sitting alone on a bench outside the chapel. "You okay?" Daniel asked. Nodding. "I keep thinking, if you hadn't done what you did, I might have kept smoking. I might have ended up like him." Daniel sat beside him. "I didn't know if it would work." Ryan looked at him. "It did, because you cared enough to show me the truth instead of just yelling at me." Daniel swallowed hard. That evening, they returned home exhausted. Daniel poured 2 glasses of water and handed one to Ryan. "You know," Daniel said, "I used to think punishment was about fear." Ryan took a sip. "It kind of is." Daniel nodded. "But fear only stops behavior. It doesn't change it." Ryan leaned back. "Understanding does." Daniel smiled faintly. "You're wiser than I was at your age." Ryan shrugged. "I had a good teacher." Months passed. Ryan stayed smoke-free, not because it was forbidden, but because it no longer served him. Daniel stayed strict, but not closed. Rules remained, boundaries mattered, but now they came with conversations, context, and care. One night, as Ryan prepared for bed, he paused at Daniel's doorway. "Dad?" "Yeah?" "If I mess up again, you'll still talk to me first, right?" Daniel didn't hesitate. Always. Ryan nodded, relief washing over his face. Okay. Good night. Good night. Daniel stood in the quiet hallway long after Ryan's door closed. He thought about the cigarettes, the anger he'd felt, the punishment that shocked both of them. And he understood now. The most powerful thing he'd done wasn't taking something away. It was stepping closer when it mattered most. Because when a child makes the wrong choice, the lesson that lasts isn't fear. It's knowing someone cared enough to guide them back. The smell hit him before the truth did. It wasn't strong. It wasn't obvious. Just a faint, bitter scent that didn't belong in his house. Daniel stopped halfway up the stairs, keys still in his hand, heart slowing as his mind raced through possibilities. Cleaning chemicals, old clothes, something from the garage. But deep down, he already knew. When he opened his son's backpack later that night, he didn't feel anger at first. He felt disbelief. Because the boy he was raising, the quiet, respectful 16-year-old who said yes sir and kept his grades steady, wasn't supposed to be the kind of kid who smoked. Daniel had rules, clear ones, hard ones, and he believed rules were what kept boys from becoming men he'd later regret. So when he found the cigarettes hidden at the bottom of his son's bag, he didn't shout, he didn't threaten, he didn't lecture. Instead, he chose a punishment so unexpected, so personal, that it would force his son to face something far more dangerous than nicotine. And by the end of that week, both father and son would be changed by it. Daniel closed the front door quietly behind him and set his work boots by the mat. The house was silent, except for the low hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of a video playing upstairs. "Ryan?" Daniel called out. "Yeah?" came the reply, slightly muffled. Daniel loosened his tie and walked into the kitchen. He glanced at the clock, 7:42 p.m. Ryan was usually home by 6, already done with homework, dinner reheated, routine intact. That routine mattered to Daniel. After his wife passed, structure was the only thing that kept the house from falling apart. He poured himself a glass of water and noticed Ryan's backpack leaning against the kitchen chair. That was new. Ryan always took it upstairs. Daniel frowned slightly. He didn't touch it at first. He wasn't snooping. He hated parents who hovered and searched for reasons not to trust their kids. But then he caught it again. That smell. Faint, bitter, familiar in a way he wished it wasn't. Daniel's jaw tightened. He reached for the bag and unzipped it slowly, like he was hoping the sound alone would stop him from finding anything. Inside were the usual things: notebooks, a hoodie, a half-crushed granola bar. And then, at the bottom, wrapped in a crumpled receipt, a pack of cigarettes. Daniel stared at it for a long moment. He didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't think. Memories came rushing in instead. His own father, coughing into a rag, the hospital room that smelled like antiseptic and regret, the promise Daniel made to himself at 17, "I will never touch these." He closed the backpack carefully and sat down at the table. Anger tried to rise, but something heavier sat on his chest. Disappointment. Not just in Ryan, in himself. Upstairs, Ryan laughed at something on his screen, unaware the world he thought was hidden had just cracked open. "Ryan," Daniel called again. "Come downstairs." The laughter stopped. A minute later, Ryan came down the stairs, phone in hand, hoodie sleeves pulled halfway over his fingers. He stopped when he saw his father sitting at the table. "What's up?" Ryan asked casually. Daniel didn't answer right away. He reached into the backpack and placed the cigarette pack on the table between them. Ryan froze. The color drained from his face so fast it scared him. Daniel watched closely. He didn't see rebellion. He didn't see defiance. He saw fear. "How long?" Daniel asked calmly. Ryan swallowed. I don't know." "That wasn't the question. How long have you been smoking?" Ryan's eyes flicked to the floor. "A few weeks." Daniel nodded once. Where did you get them? A friend? Who? Ryan hesitated. It doesn't matter. Daniel leaned forward slightly. It does. Ryan exhaled, shoulders slumping. Ethan, from school. Silence stretched between them. Daniel folded his hands together. Why? Ryan shrugged, but his voice cracked slightly. I don't know. Everyone was doing it. It helped me calm down. That answer landed harder than Daniel expected. Calm down from what? Ryan didn't respond. Daniel waited. Seconds passed. Then a full minute. Finally, Ryan said quietly, Stuff. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment. This was the part he hadn't planned for. He had prepared himself for lies, for excuses, for attitude, not for silence. You know the rules, Daniel said at last. You know how I feel about this. Ryan nodded. Yeah. Then why break them? Ryan's voice dropped. Because sometimes rules don't stop how you feel. Daniel felt that in his chest. Still, rules were rules. You're grounded, Daniel said. No phone, no going out. School and home only. Ryan nodded. No argument, no anger. But something about that obedience unsettled Daniel. Ryan turned to go upstairs. Wait, Daniel said. Ryan stopped. I'm not finished, Daniel added. Ryan turned back slowly. Daniel picked up the cigarette pack again, turning it over in his hands. This, he said, is not the real punishment. Ryan looked confused. It's not? Daniel met his eyes. No, he said quietly. What I'm going to do next is. Ryan felt a chill run down his spine. Grounding was familiar territory. He could survive losing his phone, missing weekend plans, being stuck in the house. He had already started planning how he'd get through the next few weeks quietly, keeping his head down until things went back to normal. But his father's words kept replaying in his mind. This is not the real punishment. That part scared him. Daniel, meanwhile, lay awake in his own room staring at the ceiling. Anger came and went in waves, but underneath it was something heavier. Fear. Not the kind that makes you shout, but the kind that makes you think about hospitals, funerals, and promises you never want your child to break. By morning, Daniel had made his decision. At breakfast, Ryan sat at the table picking at his food, eyes tired, shoulders tense. Eat, Daniel said, calm but firm. Ryan forced down a few bites. Am I in more trouble? Daniel folded his newspaper and looked at him. You're going to school today. After that, you're coming with me. Ryan frowned. Where? Daniel stood up and grabbed his keys. You'll see. They drove in silence, not the angry silence Ryan was used to, but something quieter and more deliberate. Daniel didn't turn on the radio, he didn't rush, he drove carefully, like every decision mattered. When Ryan saw the sign ahead, his stomach dropped. County Medical Center. Why are we here? Ryan asked, panic creeping into his voice. Daniel parked the car. You wanted to calm down, he said. You said smoking helped, so I'm going to show you what it actually leads to. Ryan's hands started to shake. Dad, I don't... Come, Daniel said, already stepping out. Inside, the smell hit Ryan first. Clean, sharp, uncomfortable. They checked in quietly. A nurse nodded at Daniel like she knew him. As they walked down the hallway, Ryan whispered, You've been here before. Daniel didn't deny it. Too many times. They stopped outside a room. Daniel rested his hand on the door handle, but didn't open it yet. My father smoked, he said softly. Started when he was younger than you. Thought he could quit whenever he wanted. Ryan's throat tightened. He never did, Daniel continued. This is where it ended. Daniel opened the door. Inside, an older man lay in bed. Thin, pale, oxygen tubes running into his nose. His breathing was slow, labored, like every breath cost him something. The man turned his head and smiled weakly when he saw Daniel. Danny, he rasped. Ryan froze. "This is Mr. Harris," Daniel said quietly. "My father." Ryan's chest tightened. He hadn't known Daniel's father was still alive. He hadn't known he was like this. Daniel pulled a chair closer to the bed and gestured for Ryan to do the same. "This is my son, Ryan." The old man's eyes softened as he looked at Ryan. "You're tall," he said, voice trembling. "Your dad was about your height when I taught him to drive." Ryan swallowed hard. He couldn't stop staring at the tubes, the machines, the way the man's hands shook. Daniel stood. "I'll give you two a moment." Ryan's eyes widened. "Dad!" Daniel shook his head gently. "Listen." Then he stepped out into the hallway. Inside the room, silence pressed down on Ryan. Finally, the old man spoke again. "Your dad mad at you?" Ryan hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah." "For smoking?" the old man asked. Ryan's eyes widened. "How did you—" The old man let out a dry, painful laugh. "Because that's how it always starts." Ryan felt his throat close. "I didn't think it was a big deal." "I didn't either," the man said, "until it was." He shifted slightly, grimacing. "I can't walk across the room without help. I can't breathe without a machine. I can't hug my son with wires between us." Ryan's eyes burned. "If you could go back, would you stop?" The man didn't answer right away. Then he said quietly, "I'd stop before I ever started." Ryan nodded, tears slipping down his face. Daniel returned a few minutes later. He didn't say a word as they left. On the drive home, Ryan stared out the window. "That's the punishment?" he finally asked. Daniel glanced at him. "No." Ryan's heart dropped again. "When we get home, you're throwing those cigarettes away in front of me, and then you're coming to work with me every weekend, volunteering." "Where?" "At the center," Daniel said, "helping people who made the same choice." Ryan nodded slowly. He didn't argue. At home, he took the cigarettes from his bag and dropped them into the trash. He didn't hesitate. He didn't look back. That night, Ryan lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the hospital room over and over, the smell, the sound of breathing, the regret in the old man's eyes. For the first time, smoking didn't feel rebellious. It felt terrifying. But what Ryan didn't realize yet was that the most shocking part of his father's punishment hadn't even begun.